Detective Elara Vance had seen her fair share of peculiar cases, but the incident at Briarstone Manor eclipsed them all, not for its gore nor for its political implications, but for the simple, infuriating fact that it was impossible. The kind of case that broke minds and birthed urban legends. The kind that left you staring at your reflection wondering what truth actually meant. And it all began on the morning of February 6th, when Elara was summoned to the estate of reclusive billionaire author Hadrian Marsh, whose sudden disappearance from the literary world 10 years prior had birthed wild rumors of insanity, secret cults, and blackmail. But none of those could hold a candle to the truth that awaited her at the scene. A single shot to the heart. The door was locked from the inside. No key in sight, no way out, no fingerprints, no noise, and no conceivable point of entry or exit. The room itself was a fortress, locked from the inside with mechanical bolts, a biometric scanner, and a reinforced steel door that could have withstood a bomb, with the only windows sealed, unbroken, and reinforced with iron lattice. The room contained only Hadrian's lifeless body slumped in his wingback chair, a glass of untouched brandy at his side, and a crimson envelope addressed simply to the Finder of Truth, which contained only a single page reading, "You're already inside." A message so cryptic Elara didn't know whether to laugh or leave, and her instincts, honed over 20 years with the Bureau, told her this wasn't just a murder. It was a performance, a challenge, a riddle for which she'd been handpicked, perhaps even manipulated into solving. For Hadrian Marsh was a known master of psychological thrillers and experimental narratives. And though many thought he'd vanish to escape public life, Elara had always suspected his silence was the setup for his final and greatest twist. Now, as she stood over his corpse in the immaculate room, an octagonal study lined with antique books, old clocks, an extinguished fireplace, and a single chessboard mid-game, she couldn't help but feel the ghost of his presence orchestrating her every move. And though the initial forensic sweep found no gunpowder residue, no foreign DNA, and no signs of forced entry, there were inconsistencies. The old grandfather clock had stopped at 3:17 a.m. The inkwell on his desk had been spilled, yet there was no writing near it, and the security system showed no breaches, except for a 5-second static glitch at precisely 3:17 a.m., during which all cameras inside the manor went black, a detail so precise it felt too cinematic to be coincidence. Elara, frustrated but fascinated, spent the night combing through Hadrian's past, reading his interviews, his books, particularly the unpublished manuscript the housekeeper found in the fireplace ashes, mostly burned, but the last few pages remained intact, describing a character eerily similar to Hadrian himself, staging his own death inside a locked room, not to escape life, but to become immortal in mystery, a final act so perfect it would transcend fiction. But what caught Elara's attention most was the last line, half-charred but legible. "He who knows the rules may bend them, but he who writes them, he breaks them," and she wondered if Hadrian had killed himself in the most impossibly puzzling way, or if, even more disturbingly, someone had helped him make it look that way, and so she interviewed the staff. The maid who claimed to have heard a clock chime 3 times and then a single sharp thump. The cook who swore she saw a shadow pass the hallway mirror despite the corridor being empty. And the butler, an unnervingly quiet man named Collins, who provided alibis for everyone and seemed almost too calm, too precise in his recollections, as if rehearsed, but no evidence placed any of them near the study that night, and the locks required Hadrian's retina to open. Yet it was Elara's own subconscious that screamed at her that the key wasn't physical, but philosophical. That Hadrian had constructed the room not just as a physical space, but as a metaphorical one, a box inside a box. And she began reviewing his writings again, especially one obscure short story titled "The Author Dies Twice," in which the protagonist is murdered by a character he himself created, blurring the line between author and fiction, between life and story. And then she saw it, in the chessboard's configuration, a puzzle hidden in plain sight. The Knight's Tour, an ancient problem where the knight visits every square once, encoded as the number of books on each shelf, each representing a square on the board. And when she mapped it out, it spelled the word pawn. And suddenly she felt cold, because Hadrian had always said the pawn is the most underestimated piece, yet it holds the power to change the game when it reaches the far end. And then it clicked. Collins, the butler, had been dismissed by Hadrian in his will only days before, but also named as the executor. Or a contradiction unless one saw it for what it was. A final game where Collins, the pawn, had reached the end and become something more, and when Elara confronted him with the implication, he did not deny it. Instead, he smiled and said, "You found the door, detective," before handing her a second crimson envelope, which read simply, "There is no mystery without a witness." And she realized Hadrian had orchestrated his death, recruited Collins not as a killer, but as a stagehand in his last performance, ensuring every detail was preserved, every clue left perfectly in place. Not to solve a murder, but to create a myth. Collins had activated a mechanism hidden in the baseboard, a pneumatic system that had fired the gun remotely at Hadrian's chest. The weapon then retracted and concealed in the false back of the fireplace, all timed to the exact second of the camera glitch, which Hadrian himself had programmed years earlier, anticipating this very moment, and Elara stood in stunned silence as Collins walked away, freely, as per Hadrian's final wishes, immune by legal technicality and shielded by the author's carefully drafted contracts. And as the press called it a suicide, and scholars debated its meaning, Elara published her own memoir of the case, not revealing the truth, but framing it as a philosophical inquiry into narrative, control, and the illusions of logic, knowing that was what Hadrian wanted all along, not justice, but legend. And at night she often found herself back in that room in her dreams, the clock stuck forever at 3:17, wondering if in solving the puzzle she had become part of it, if Hadrian's words were more prophecy than fiction. You're already inside, for in that room, in that mystery, she had been trapped, not by walls, not by locks, but by the very idea of a perfect story. And in that moment, as she stared into the empty chair that once held the greatest mystery writer of his time, she knew she would never leave it. Not really. For a locked room is not a space, but a state of mind, and the door had vanished the moment she stepped inside.